This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
And she's here in the room this morning with us. Jean, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Karibu sana and welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you for having me.
We go around the African continent every week. We come back from a different country with its proverbs. Dennis will tell you where we are this week. We'd love to get your interpretation.
Jean, which is the largest country in Africa by landmass?
By landmass.
It's Algeria.
Sudan?
Algeria, yes.
Okay.
And they have a beautiful fox called the large-eared fennec fox.
The
It's a big-eared fennec fox.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful animal. Yeah, looks like it's something you can tame, but remember, it is a fox. All right. The country is also rich in oil, and it is what they use for pushing the economy. But one thing that stands out for Algeria is the fact that 70% of lawyers in the country are women, and 60% of judges in the country are also women. So when you talk about a 2/3 gender rule, perhaps we need to go there to just learn how they're doing it. All right. But let's go to the proverb: speak kindly or refrain from talking. Speak kindly or refrain from talking. What do you think Algerians are saying?
Speak kindly or refrain from talking. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Just keep quiet. Yeah. Don't offend people. Yeah. Be kind always. I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's blissful to just shut up.
Isn't it just?
Yeah.
Right.
Being silent.
Okay. So even as we get into this, give us an insight into what the disability law is all about.
Overall, it's all about protecting the rights of persons with disabilities in different sectors, whether it's employment, health, and education. And it's a framework to ensure that persons with disabilities are included in all facets of our society, because we've seen that in the past they have been left aside, discriminated against because of the perceived notions around disability. But as for the Act itself, now the framework, it provides guidelines for all sectors of our society so that they're included in our workspaces, and also to support them access opportunities, access healthcare, access education, and ensure that our institutions have been aligned so that they're inclusive. We have all the devices, all the resources that we need so that children, adults with disabilities are able to access opportunities.
So the law has taken the approach of inclusivity so that the people with disabilities are part of conversations, in these rooms for conversations to take place, and that they don't feel left out. You know, for a very long time we've just seen what has always been pushed is let's have ramps, you know. But this conversation is even larger in terms of ensuring that the private sector, most of the time we focused only on the public sector, but this one now also brings in the private sector. How have we been faring in terms of just ensuring that people with disabilities feel like they're part of the society, part of this conversation, and part of the room?
I'd say in the private sector, slow progress around that, because initially they were not legally mandated to include persons with disabilities in their spaces. But right now, the law, this is an obligation. It's no longer you doing me a favor. It's required of the law. It's more than a moral requirement. It's more than the projects or the programs that we have around charity, but it's a legal obligation for you to create an inclusive space for me to be able to thrive and access certain opportunities that are available. Yes.
Okay. So also joining us in the room this morning as we have this conversation is Julius Mbura, who is the head of advocacy at Enable. Good morning, Julius.
Good morning to you.
How are you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Karibu sana to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed for being here. And Jean is just, giving us a heads up in terms of what the disability law is all about. We'd like to hear from you what that is from your perspective, how that then does play out in society today.
I would say the Disability Act of 2025 has brought many changes. It actually looks at disability as a right rather than what we used to have. In 2003, we had the Disability Act, the first one of its kind. And now in 2025, we are talking about disability as a right. And from that, the way Jean has said, we are looking at compliance rather than voluntary inclusion, because in the past it was more of us trying to plead with employers to look at persons with disabilities as people who can contribute positively at the work environment. But now when you have merit, you are taken as any other person, so equality is supposed to kick in. The Disability Act of 2025 has brought 3 very important sections. Section 21, 22, and 23 that focus on employment for persons with disabilities. So it has spelled out what would amount to discrimination, segregation, and also what should be reasonable accommodation. Over and above what people used to know as reasonable accommodation, which is obviously ramps, we have digital accessibility and also other components that amount to reasonable accommodation, like assistive devices and also assistance, like having someone like a reader for people who are blind, a sign language interpreter for people who are deaf. So reasonable accommodation varies from individual to individual. Even if we have the same disability, the other blind person might need more accommodation than I would need. So you should look at a person with a disability as a distinct individual, not the way people just fix and go. So you might have a deaf person, but the next deaf person comes with other needs. So when you look at such situations, then you provide reasonable accommodation according to what the person needs and not what you think that this person needs.
All right. So there is the aspect of, Jean, when you talk about employment and what has been set aside, it's at around 5%? 5%, right? Yeah. So 5% is what has been set to what everybody should adhere to. But this is Kenya. Enforcement of this is a problem. So from as stakeholders, how are we ensuring that what has been set aside, which is as per the law, must be achieved? And how are we faring so far?
Like I said, the law is about less than a year old, and so there's a lot of groundwork to be done in terms of sensitization, especially for our employers, for them to fully understand the law and the expectations that it has towards them. And we've also seen that the government has made certain commitments under the is it the Kenya Joint Disability
Strategy of 2025-2027?
I forgot that. But it made certain commitments with regard to employment, and so there's a lot of work to be done in terms of the it's like, what would I say? Is it planting seeds? Like we've already this is the land that we're going to work on. But now we have to dig it, we have to till it, start planting seeds so that eventually we begin to see the fruits. So there's a lot of groundwork like organizations such as ourselves need to be doing to sensitize employers and to help them figure out, like in our structures and in our systems, what can we do to ensure that we are fulfilling the law, and what progressive changes can be made in our systems and in our policies. So like he had alluded to about the reasonable accommodation. Even in our policies, there need to be accommodation procedures. There needs to be, the law also provides for universal standard design on accessibility. So there are those basic standards that institutions need to have, need to start implementing so that we can start to look at also now what are the individual needs of every individual with disability. But there are those standards. But we know that these institutions, private and public, need a lot of support, and that's why we and other organizations in the disability space come together to start to create awareness, sensitize and advocate and provide every kind of support that they need so that they are able to implement them.
How have things progressed or changed? Let's give it 10-year cap on all of this. Julius, when we think about the space that you have to exist in, sight assisted, obviously. how have things changed? Take 10 years ago to what you're experiencing now. It usually helps us to then be able to chart and say, okay, this is what is required.
I think the society has really embraced disability in a big way, because 10 years ago, even like walking in town by myself, you'd feel the reluctancy from people to assist. And sometimes I'm in very tricky situations like crossing the road. I think over time, because of sensitization and awareness, people are becoming more educated on disability, because if you even date back 2 decades, people would think that disability is contagious. So even coming close to me becomes a problem. Again, the perception of persons with disabilities being a charity case has evolved over time, and now we are seen as capable people, in the society. Because 10 years ago, even walking into a room, you'd be seen like someone who's begging. I remember there's a time I was walking into a restaurant, and I was actually I was not given access because they thought I was there to beg because I have my white cane. But that has changed over time, because we have persons with disabilities who've gone over and above, to hold very significant positions in organizations. And also personally, you find that persons with disabilities are really developing themselves with their skill set, talent, and also how they are seen in the society, the outlook.
So how old is the law?
The law is it's clocking 1 year.
Clocking 1 year.
Yeah,
now,
in May.
Yeah. So when you talk about access, I'll just give you an example. When you talk about access, for what many Kenyans have always known is we just put a ramp that that pretty much has been when you talk about access. But nowadays, if you go even to an elevator, you'd find there is braille on the buttons, right?
Yes.
Nowadays, there is the need of having digital, even elevators that you hear the flow you're going to help you. Yes, the voice output. But there is also heavy infrastructure development that is needed, especially around bus stops, around the train stations, because it is based off what you see outside that you get will learn, because others you'd find just next to the train there is I don't know how to call them, but they're
tactile markings
that tell you where to stop and when it is to enter and all that. This calls for major investment from the government perspective. All right. And this law was passed by Parliament. It is the president that signed it into law, right?
Yes.
Have we seen any move towards that? I know the new crossing around Haile Selassie has put in place elevators that will help with that. But are we seeing other places also investment into the same being done? If not, when? Because the law is not waiting for implementation. It has to be done now. So any engagement with the government that you're having to ensure that this is achieved?
I think for now it's mostly pushing for the government to allocate even resources towards these changes. And now we see that they have mandated the National Council to oversee that entire process. So pushing for more allocation of budgets, especially you see even in these public institutions, like just a normal building, public, just going to the washroom, you can tell that a person who even has a wheelchair is unable to access those spaces. So there's a lot of resources that is required towards making those infrastructural changes so that to support accessibility. And that even goes towards the private sector. There's a lot of investment that is required and a lot of support and mobilization of resources. We understand that it's going to be progressive from my perspective. Even to change our educational institutions, you find it's a handful of institutions that our kids can go to and they are very accessible. The restrooms are okay, the classrooms are good. You find the curriculum is set, they have the teachers that they need and they are not overwhelmed. So there's a lot of resources that is required for us to ensure that this law is fully implemented. And I think even in our space we are very alive to the fact of the kind of investment that is required. So just pushing for more resource allocation even from the private sector to set aside resources to make those changes.
So one of the things that a law does is that you put it in place so that everybody must abide by it.
Yeah.
But one of the fundamental things that a law does as well is that then it activates the resources that are needed to allow that certain thing to happen.
Yeah.
So one would have imagined, Julius, that with this law that came into being, we saw Senator Crystal Asige really fight to at least have the recognition that it was necessary for it to be done.
Yeah.
Law brought in place and then passed. Parliament sat, read 1, 2, 3, it was passed. So it should have then activated the funds that were necessary to have this done. So before I ask the legislative question in terms of, okay, was the money then released? Have we seen it out there? What difference does it make when the funds are released for certain things to happen? What difference, whether it is somebody who lives with a hearing disability, whether it's someone who lives with a vision disability, whether it's someone who lives with a mobility disability, whatever the case may be, what does it do to change the existence of somebody for these things that we're asking for?
I think the first thing when resource allocation is done, budgetary allocation, for persons with disabilities, it's the relief, knowing that I will go to National Council and get the assistive device I need, or get the assistance that I need for my daily activities, or even for my productivity, say at the workplace. The second thing is we change a lot, because I normally say having a disability is very expensive, especially if you're at par with the society, because you need a lot of assistive technologies, and all these cost money, and it's a lot of money. So for me to actually own a laptop that has a screen reader, that gives me access to what other people would consume on papers, So I would say when we have the laws, then we activate and implement the way it's supposed to be. That goes a long way to actually, out of the people who've been marginalized for the longest time, half of them get to go to the next level, which is now exploiting their potential on what they can do and how they can actually get into the job market and even beyond.
One thing that has happened for a very long time, even I know, Julius, that you are a motor vehicle reviewer,
yes.
And with that, and what you do as well, there's a lot that goes into how persons with disabilities are handled. Many think that if I give you a job, it's a favor.
Yeah.
It knocks idea too, or
Yes.
I'm doing that because the law says it, and not because the said individual that I'm talking to is qualified to be there. And with this, we see that in terms of even parks pay, it's because nakufanyia favor, or because you are here and you are reviewing, someone would say, I don't think they can do a better job. And you find there's always inequality, there is injustice that goes into that. And that has been addressed by the law.
Yeah.
So in terms of the private sector picking this up and understanding what the law says, right? So that there is equality walking the talk, because most of the time it's just talk. One will just look at the law and say, that is for others to follow.
Yeah.
How has it been for you in terms of discrimination when it comes to employment, and how then do you come in Jean, in making sure that awareness is out there and that even persons with disabilities know their rights? So I start with you, Julius.
I think for me, I've always used the opportunity to educate people, especially when they discriminate me or they think that I'm not as capable, because what you need to understand is that the wider society will always first look at the disability. So it's upon us to show them that the disability is an afterthought, because there is what I'm capable of and there is the skill sets that I come with. So like when I'm reviewing cars, that's not something, and I've been put to test. People even blindfold me, and which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because,
Come on.
Yeah.
and there are certain provisions in the law that prohibits, even because in the past people would even take tests to prove that they have the disability, especially invisible disabilities. This has been prohibited, and actually it's you can be penalized for that. And discrimination now is very frowned upon, because in the past, people, even employers, would get away with the fact that they feel that you have a disability. They even put you on a lower position that now they feel like, because you have a disability, you just linger around, But now, if I'm supposed to be at a managerial position and I am merited for that, and you don't put me on such position, or I acquire a disability in my duties, and you actually, because people have been retrenched, people have been sacked because of having a disability, and now the employer feels like you cannot contribute anymore. And this one now, and even for the private sector, they've been given tax incentives, which is tax reliefs.
Yeah.
So if you employ persons with disabilities, you're obligated to 25% of taxable income to be deducted, and that you have to prove through the National Council, because of course the employers who are ujanja.
Sure.
So they will try and mask themselves that they are giving back to the society. They have persons with disabilities, so you have to prove, because there are also ways of auditing. As Jane said, the National Council has auditors who will look into what you purport to have done and what is on ground and paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the longest time, it was as though the desire was for governments and or people who are in positions of influence to feel sorry for people living with disability. And what we're saying is that's not the case, because these are citizens of countries who have working brains, who are able to do anything that anybody else is able to do. But there is a demand on the system to say that previously, when you excluded members of the society, we are saying that the disability should not lead to that exclusion. That regardless of the disability, you now must do something extra to ensure that they can operate in our society like everybody else, right? So it's not a matter of feeling sorry for anybody. No. That there is a disability somewhere, but it is not an inability to function. I believe those are the tenets upon which we set this thing for the first place. Is there a general understanding, at the place where the laws are made, where the money is spent, is there a general understanding that we're not saying, no, look at Julius and feel bad because, he's vision impaired, or look at somebody who cannot move like you and let's feel sorry for them. No. Because with that feeling sorry, what you do is that you do the bare minimum as opposed to doing what is required for you to do so that everybody is living in an inclusive society. Is that understanding there, Jean?
I think for now, yes. I'd say, like he alluded to earlier, Julia said, initially the first law was more charitable based, like the favor aspect. You're doing me a favor. There are these people in society, so we need to do them a favor so that they're included. But right now, this is a rights-based approach. It is my right to be included in these spaces. It is my right to access opportunities in terms of employment, in terms of education. It is my right to participate in politics. It is my right to live a dignified and fulfilling life. So therefore, this law, what it does is set aside the whole yes, we want empathy, because we understand that when we are trying to talk to employers and sensitizing them, it also comes from a place of empathy. I need you to understand the Julius's experience, and even me, when you don't see me, maybe my disability is not visible, I need you to have an understanding and be empathetic. So when I understand, I'm able to take measures intentionally to change systems, because these systems are made by men, right? And it's the fact that it's the knowledge that I have on disability. So if the knowledge, the information is skewed against a person with disability, it means they need an intervention from other people who have an understanding of disability to change that perspective, so that when I change your perspective, it is easy for you to develop policy around disability so that it's inclusive for every single person, that I'm able to create these spaces. Why do we need to create spaces? Because like she said earlier, you had set me aside, you had excluded me from society because you had a certain perspective around me, about me. So yes, there's a law which says this is my right, but then there's a need for a change of mindset. So that's where we come in, sensitizing employers, doing disability awareness training. And that's also one of the mandates of the National Council. One of the programs is to sensitize employers, provide awareness, because a lack of knowledge continues to propagate these misconceptions on disability. Yes.
You know, one thing that the easiest way to start dealing with, or rather getting rid of the notion out there, would be to start early. You know, because you'd find there is a population of individuals in this country who've gone through an entire education system with never being in class with someone with a disability. Hence the reason why there is that segregation and that warrior feeling that does exist in the society. So then brings the question in terms of there is what we need to do in terms of employment, right? There are the inclusion and everything else as per the law. But how about as a country we introduce a policy, you know, let us mingle with persons with disability from a very young age, from school. You know, I had privilege of being in a school where we had school for the deaf, and through that mingling you find sign language. I could pick a few things here and there, and you grow up with them being your friends. As gymnastics, there were some of the best gymnasts we had in school. And through starting early, through school early, and engaging with them, then people, a country grows knowing that someone with a disability is just like me. It's just a challenge they have, but we are, with what I can do, they can do, or even they can do it better than us. Perhaps, Julius, introducing these in the curriculum in schools and having these spaces created from primary ECD would be one solution to addressing the issues that we do have, especially on inclusivity.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the law that was repealed, the 2003. It had provided for special needs education system. And I went through that education system. What would be the disadvantage, and I like your approach, is that I went through primary school, high school, in a school for the blind, both primary and high school. But university, there is no university for the blind. So what happens? You get into a class of 300 students, like in my case, and I'm the only one, not only blind, but with any kind of disability. So it's upon you to actually start fighting the system, to show lecturers how to accommodate you with reasonable accommodation, like reading materials in soft copy, so that I can use my laptop to read for me. During exam, being given alternative formats for me to actually interact and sit for the same exam that others are sitting for. Over and above, also the mindset of the students, because these students, they've been through schools, but they've never interacted with anyone who's blind in their life. So it becomes like a shock to them. And now you have to navigate through the psychological, because now you have to really accommodate everyone. Regardless. So there are those who are very ignorant, there are those who are very sympathetic, and there are those who don't cares, you know. So you have to accommodate all of this because you are the constant. Over and above, I had to really reset my mindset and perception, because now these people, they are coming from different backgrounds. But if they could be integrated from a young age, and this is what the new Disability Act has brought, which is inclusive education, where there are no schools for the blind and schools for the deaf and mainstream schools. You can take your student to any school, so long as the school provides the right tools and equipment, so that this student, regardless of their disability, they can learn in the same situation, same environment with the other students. Because that what that does is that they grow knowing that there are persons with disabilities in the community, and we are not supposed to exclude them.
Do you think we have dropped traditional cultural hang-ups as a society, over the reasons behind disability? And does that contribute to then how we make laws and follow the laws? Because we seem to think that the people who make the laws or follow the laws are not part of society. They're human beings who grew up in those settings, who believed certain things about disability. And we can't say it because it's the truth, it's out there. People thought there was a curse or, some ridiculous stuff that has come up, Have we started to drop those and said, you know what, we're in progressive societies where we should be able to make laws, abide by them, and have an all-inclusive society? Jean, have we dropped those, or do we still have those hang-ups?
In my perspective, I think that when we are living in urban areas, there's a perception that we don't have those kinds of mindsets. But when you start to talk to people, you realize that they still have those mindsets, that some types of disability. If you find in a family there's more than one person with disability, this family has a curse. There's need for spiritual intervention or whatever. But even in our homes, I really feel, in my perspective, what I've seen is that those traditional mindsets have not changed. And that is why the law also provides punishments for abandonment, exclusion, ritual killings, because some of them are used for ritual killings. They are provided for that, even to the extent of punishment is life in imprisonment, because sometimes it ends in the death or complete segregation or exclusion of this person with disability. Because in my community or in my family, I've never had a person with disability. I don't know how to deal with them, especially if you have maybe this neurodivergent disabilities. You find sometimes wengine tunawaita wendazimu wenye wako kwa barabara, but then it's a mental illness that there's medication and there's support for it. But because of the perspective they have grown up understanding, I won't say, okay, we need to go to hospital. I'll go to either my traditional herbalist or whatever, or I'll go to my pastor. I'm not saying spiritual needs should not be met, but I'm saying also there are other things, medical support that is needed. And so my perspective, I do not believe that we have dropped those traditional thinking. I think that we're in an urban setting and we tend to hide those perspectives until someone now points it out or someone says something out of turn and you're like, oh, Kube, this is the way you think. So we just hide it. But in the rural areas, it's not necessarily hidden. We know familia kina nani ao wakona wamekasio because they have all these people with disability, all their children. And then sometimes it's a genetic issue.
Hereditary.
Yes. Yeah, it's hereditary. So my perspective, what I've seen and what I've engaged in my community and also just being in the disability space, I don't think those mindsets have changed. I think that we are just in the public eye or in spaces, you need to color it for us to look a certain way so that people don't think a certain way about you.
Oh, okay. So, Julius, education is still is a necessity over some of these issues, do you think? And where should we take this education? And if I could just put a caveat there, because at the school level, and I'm talking about children growing up, we can really be mean. And it's not necessarily because we want to be. I find that people are mean because they do not understand. So if they understood, if they were educated, do you think that this would have an impact on some of the things that we see that Jean has even mentioned?
Yes, I think we overlook some aspects of education. We look at a school setup, right? Like when I lost my sight at the age of 10, I used to feel safe when I was in school rather than home. Why? The other parents would actually tell their kids, even when I'm hearing, like, don't play with Julius, you'll bring the curse home, right? And now that kid will grow up knowing that blind people are actually bad people, or that's a curse that I wouldn't want to associate with, right? So education should go beyond the school setup, and actually parents and caregivers should be part of this, so that they become ambassadors. And I remember my mom became my ambassador from a very young age. She used to now confront these parents and tell them, you can't discriminate my child just because he's blind. And this is not contagious. It's not like he'll bring the curse to your kid.
There's no curse in the first place.
There's no curse in the first place.
Yeah.
But because of the mentality and, those traditional backgrounds, people grow up knowing that persons with disabilities, that's a bad omen, that's a burden, that's a curse. But if you're not shifted perspectives from a young age, then you'll never know that we are just like anyone else. And I normally tell people, this is a club that doesn't need membership. You can wake up in the morning and you're actually blind or deaf. Anything can happen. You might be going on with your daily activities and you get an accident, God forbid, and you join the club. Then who will prepare you for that, right? Then I think the other portion is for people who acquire disabilities at adulthood. That's something else that has been neglected, because people think that you're only born with a disability. There are those, and that's the biggest percentage. You acquire your disability when you're already an adult. So you now have to rearrange your life. You have to readjust to the new reality. I get calls almost every week. People asking me, oh, I lost my sight during the riots. So how am I supposed to go about this? Rehabilitation. Making sure that now this person understands that this disability doesn't impair anything else. I normally say my disability didn't take anything from me, right? And that's how you start unlocking parts and potential that you didn't know you had. But if you're stuck to the disability, then you'll never see past the limitations.
You see, Jean, even as we talk about disability, what assists a person with disability is equally not affordable. You talk about those who need hearing devices. How much does it go for? We talk about a proper wheelchair. How much does it go for? A white cane, and there is cost involved with it, and that needs to be addressed. It is there, but there are those who want to make bank with it, profits and all that. But then again, there has to be a hand that helps in, say, regulating the industry to make it affordable, because like we've said, it is an area that, as much as we say under the law that we are all equal under the law, but we recognize that there is necessary investment that needs to be put in place to assist persons with disability have that normalcy like everybody else, right? How are we going about it? Because you'd find many people don't have hearing aids because they're expensive. That those who don't have because a wheelchair is not just a wheelchair. There's wheelchair for different cadres of disability. So how are we having these discussions? Because I know there is what the government does, but it does not get the population that we have today. How are we going about it? Or what should Kenyans do to make it easier?
I think there's a lot more that needs to be done in order for guys with different disabilities to be able to access these devices to support their mobility needs or other kinds of needs. I'd still say the government does have a huge responsibility to create the environment for even the design and development and innovations. We need to support the innovations. There are so many people even here in Kenya who have come up with innovative ideas to provide the devices, but then they're also very expensive. So there's really a lot of resources that needs to be put into the ecosystem to support these innovators so that they develop these devices, so that eventually when they reach the individual that needs it, it's affordable for them to access. Even the children that need it, we know there are children already who need some of these devices. So we are saying that we are creating accessible schools. But if I don't have a wheelchair for me to move to go to school,
how do I get there?
Yes, and if my parent is unable to provide it, they are a caregiver, they cannot maybe do work as everyone else, they are unable to meet that need. It means I'm excluded from going to school. I'm excluded for fulfilling my talents and my desires at the end of it all. So I do know that the government has a huge role in providing creating this environment for it to be conducive for innovators, and even for the international innovators to come in and provide parts. Some of these spare parts, they don't even get them in the country. They are not available for them to provide to develop these devices. And even getting just one device, a wheelchair, a white Kenya. Even let's say we talk about creating accessible workstations. Even the laptop, the technology, the software that is needed is actually very expensive for one person.
How much are we talking about here? Because we've said very expensive for like the white cane, which assists, like the one you have, Julius, which assists you. What does it do for you that you're able to feel your surroundings? You know direction in which you're going, right?
Yes.
What does it do for you?
Yeah, for the weekend, this is like my eyes.
Yes.
I normally say my eyes are metallic. So I use it everywhere. And for people who've seen me before, you'll never see me without my white cane. But I had to import this actually. And for me to get it, I had to part with 10,000.
10,000 shillings?
Yes.
Okay.
And not many people can afford
10,000 shillings.
That's a lot of money.
Jean is alluding to screen readers.
Okay.
We have JAWS, which is paid for, right? Job access with speech. A license goes for 125,000.
A license to do what now?
To use now the software.
Okay.
So you renew the license.
That's a necessity for me. And this actually can get outdated. I think it goes for like 3-4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, and you have to buy another one, right? So I would say the government needs to support local manufacturing, innovations. People are coming up with solutions. We normally conduct a conference every other year, Inclusive Africa Conference, where we showcase different innovations and how persons with disabilities are tailor-making solutions. Because for me to actually go and buy a white cane at 10,000, that's ridiculous. But if the government supports at a local level, where now we can get, and that is in the new act, where tax incentives for local manufacturing is being done, so that for production, I'm not supposed to break an arm and a leg.
So can these be produced in Kenya?
They can be produced.
They can?
Yeah.
What would be needed? I mean, I think these are the conversations that we should be having.
Yeah.
What would be needed to produce white canes, for example? Because I shudder to think that there are young children, that there are adults who have to be confined to spaces because they don't have a white cane that, like you said, those are your eyes. It's providing direction. It's providing feeling of spaces. That there are folks who are confined to not moving because they cannot afford 10,000. I mean, come on, to use this. So, and there must be a way.
It's crazy because 2024, I embarked on a journey to climb Kilimanjaro. I actually did 7 mountains in 3 months to fundraise for white canes, because this is the ultimate independent mobility for people who are blind and visually impaired. When we import from, say, China in bulk, then you find that the price goes down because now you're importing in huge amounts. And when we look at local productions, we of course need the tools, equipment for production, and the material needed to produce. But when people are importing, I know one of my friends, it was very difficult for him to bring an equipment that was necessary for him to start producing gloves for sign language. This is because now for what you're bringing, you have to pay for taxes. And that has been there for the longest. I remember I had a campaign in 2023 called White Cane Drive. We imported at very cheap, but when it got into the country, we had to pay for taxes. So now then it doubles, right? And these are not expenses that you actually anticipate. It's the cargo has landed. Now you're told, oh, this one has to be paid for. But you're like, this is an assistive device. But now I think we need to sensitize, and government agencies, they need to work together to understand that even when you're bringing equipment or say assistive devices that are supposed to help persons with disabilities, the tax reliefs are supposed to be activated at that point.
I agree. Or even just, if you just look at the reason why you're importing from China, perhaps it's because the continent does not have anyone who's manufacturing it.
Yes.
I think the bigger conversation then should be, if that is an open market that we do, what can the Kenya government do to help innovators who are there, in terms of research and development, so that we become the suppliers of the continent. It is a bigger conversation that should be had. But even while at it, there is the aspect of with where we find ourselves today, right? So there is what ASETO needs to chip in and do. Are we having drives, the private sector to play their role? Because I know there is also tax rebates in terms of CSR activities, and also just making sure that they also get reliefs and enjoy better tax at the end of the day. Are we seeing many more people tap into this, especially from the business side?
Right now, my perspective, since the law has just passed, there's a lot like awareness and sensitization that is required. There's a lot of structure, National Council, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of sensitizing institutions. And for us, working in the disability space, we do have a convening, which is a summit for employers. So there we even connect them with innovators for assistive technology, connect them with documentation to develop best practices within the institution. So this convening of different employers from different sectors would help them now think through, how are we going to execute this law? How are we going to get access to these incentives, so that even when we are investing more resources into assistive technology, into creating accessible workspaces, there's some incentive, there's some support that we get from the state, in addition to fulfilling the law. So we do a lot of convening, like the summit you talked about, just to discuss innovations and us discussing employment and other drives that we do, bringing together employers in different sectors in the country. We don't just do Nairobi, but across the country, so that we are able to sensitize employers and are able to show them this is what we have, because in our space we already have the expertise and the know-how to help employers fulfill these obligations, because we understand the government by itself is unable to really fulfill the law to its end, to its full intention. So that's when our institutions come in to support the government to do these things.
Yes.
All right. So when we look at other jurisdictions, and oftentimes you say, well, we can't compare ourselves because we didn't start at the same place. But there's always something that we can emulate when it comes to that you wouldn't know, for example, that someone with disability could, drive a vehicle. They would be able to get from point A to point B because the support has then been provided across board. And do you think, or how do you think that collaborations ought to be? Because it is clear that putting all of our expectations on government is probably an exercise in futility. You can't do that. So whereas we say that it is not a favor that anybody is being done, the goodwill of many sectors then is called upon. Do you see that these collaborations can actually bring about, at the very least, the state where folks can say we are crossing to the point whereby it is an inclusive society? Julius?
I think we don't live in a bubble, and there are so many examples to use. There's no excuse why private employer or the corporate should say that we've not seen this being done. It's being done all over, and even African countries are embracing accessibility, inclusion on exemplary levels.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.